Hello, and welcome to another Flashpoint Q&A. Here we are, answering your silly Twitch questions once again, because that's what we value: transparency, interaction with the community, answering dumb questions. This week...
I have a question. How did you get a promotion from Twitch chat question fetcher to commissioner of the league? It's a pretty big promotion.
Yes, I have been promoted. I read Twitch chat questions so well. Didn't even bother to come up with my own questions. So in the end, Twitch chat, aren't you really the commissioner of Flashpoint? Because I'll just read your ideas and then make them reality, just like I do on this show. So Twitch chat plays commissioner. Let's go. In reality, actually, this isn't really a big difference from what I was doing before. Thorin's still the creative director. He still has final say on all of the creative stuff that happens with Flashpoint because, you know what? He's the Counter-Strike expert. So that's not me. I will continue to give my input, but he's going to be, the last call on what goes into the actual broadcast for Flashpoint. I'll still be working on formats. I'll now be on the board of governors, etc., etc. So joining us today are m1cks from Cloud9 and Legija, who has decided that he has a broken webcam. So he's on the phone, but we won't actually see him.
I apologize, gentlemen.
How'd you break your webcam? That's a very difficult thing to do.
I actually didn't. I saw it at my apartment, but tested it too late and fucked up, I guess. That's my fault. That's my fault.
Well, I mean, it wasn't anybody else's fault, so we knew that. We knew that already. So how are you doing, m1cks? How's your...
I'm doing good.
I see
Just,
you're still in the Cloud9 COVID CSGO house.
Yeah, the quarantine little circle.
Do you get to go outside ever?
Yeah, I don't actually live here. I live like close by, and then this is like the only place that I go to. So, it's been all right. Just practicing, chilling, playing.
Very good. Well, do you guys have any topics you'd like to discuss first? Thorin, you have anything for our guests?
Actually, one thing I want to know is, Legija, how involved were you actually with got brought into this Envy lineup? Because, like, for example, when I saw m1cks was added, I immediately thought, right, well, obviously you had the connection when you were in big to Xantares, and God B obviously knows all the Turkish players. Were you involved with any of these moves?
Yes, absolutely. So when I started talking to Envy and mostly Nifty, and it came like together that I'll be the coach for the team. It was pretty clear that I wanted to bring m1cks from the beginning with me, because I had a very good relationship with him. And yeah, we were all kind of involved, me, Nifty, and Ryan at the beginning. m1cks was more or less like pretty safe that he's coming with me, since I had plans already with him before that. So we were gonna join the team together. That was the plan, and yeah, in the end it worked out with Envy perfectly. And with Mishu and Moose, it was a little bit last second calls, kind of, as Nifty said last week, I think it was. We were all in this conference room. We were sitting, and out of the blue, Ryan came up with Mishu, who I think was a very good addition to the team, I'd say. But everyone was involved in it pretty much. And there was, to be honest, there was not too many options to go for, and obviously I wanted to have someone with, experience to a certain extent, which m1cks obviously has. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would just say on that is, like, listen, I'm not a fan of the Envy lineup. Like, I don't think it's good enough for Flashpoint because it's supposed to be like the best teams in the world and super massive lineups and spend millions of dollars. So they haven't done that yet. But with that said, where the lineup was before, because the lineup Envy had before that was fucking terrible, even though it had some good players, they just hadn't made it yet. m1cks actually is not a terrible gamble. Because if people don't know, anyone who's looking over in Europe right now where Big is winning fucking tournaments, Xantares and m1cks are very skilled players. The problem was Space Soldiers, the team, was a dumpster fire and it had no support and it barely ever got to go to big lands. So as a result, like, they were never going to be able to show their talent in that team. They could only get a couple of best of ones off at most big lands. So fans who think naively that the level of an individual player is the level of his team, not at all. Those players were better than a lot of players you probably think are better. The problem is They didn't have enough LAN experience, and they weren't in better teams. So I actually didn't think that was a terrible gamble to bring Calix in. I didn't think he never wasn't like the best player in Flashpoint or anything, but there was chances he could have had a pop-off season like Xantares does, I think. What do you think, Legija?
Yes, absolutely. I think that he has a very interesting skill that he has. It's very hard to win one-on-one duels against him if he has like if he has a good day. The only thing that he, I would say, lacks of is communication. He's a very quiet person that could improve him a lot, and the ability like to support your teammate and how to help and take room with your teammates together, team play. But this is the problem of, like I'd say, the most part of the Counter-Strike players.
They're
But
all just fraggers, yeah.
pretty much fraggers. The thing is, obviously I come from Big, which is like a very structured team and tactical playing team. So obviously that's my strength as well, and obviously I want to bring it into our team. But it's a very, very long process. The theory behind this thing is, in my opinion, it's the best way to play Counter-Strike, but also on the other hand, the hardest way to play Counter-Strike. So there is way too much room for making mistakes. And to bring the team to this level that I want them to have them, it takes a long time. It takes a very long time. But once we have mastered this game, then things will be much, much, much easier for us, and we won't rely on special aiming or whatever. Nifty said it back then, like same for us in Big. We were not by far not the
Of
good
course, not the most skilled
team.
team. Yeah, sure.
Yes, but we
Look at the
still had
utility
some-
damage you guys used to have, though. You were fucking topping all the charts. Yeah.
Exactly. So
I'm with you
I
on that
think-
angle as well, by the way. It's what I always say about Astralis. The reason Astralis is definitely the GOAT team to me is forget all the championships. They won those championships doing the hardest style to possibly pull off. The difference is, with the way the game goes, I'm not shocked when like G2 now wins a championship or fucking FaZe Clan used to be one of the best teams. Like those teams are just full of sick fraggers who can all make their own plays. Trying to play really structured like that is super fucking hard. Maybe m1cks can talk to this, because if people don't know, I would say one of the biggest strengths Cloud9 has is they play execute Counter-Strike, and actually I think elevates the level of some of the players. It doesn't matter that some of them are inexperienced. They can get rounds off against much better and much more experienced teams.
Yeah, I actually remember at Katowice when we had to play Astralis first. It was like the first time I'd ever played them or had to prep for them. And so I wasn't exactly sure of like what I was gonna find like actually preparing for them and playing them. And I was kind of surprised by like how almost like simple it was, and like but simple for me to understand, but just like how perfectly they just do it. And it's like, even though like I knew like everything that they pretty much do and like all those things, like they still just do it like so perfectly that it's still just hard to stop. And it's like, and especially like when we get into like down to the 2v2s and stuff, like they just completely outplayed us there and stuff. So and something about JT actually is because I was on Rogue for like 2 months last year, the MSL lineup. So actually, I actually think JT is really similar to MSL and is kind of like a similar IGL to him. I think MSL is more experienced and is more of like a leader maybe, like especially mid round, like more vocal. But I think Johnny does play like a pretty similar style to those teams. It's a lot more execute and a lot more aggressive and fast than it is. And I don't think we're as good at defaulting yet as like an MSL or an Astralis or anything. But I think yeah, it's definitely like a really hard style to pull off consistently. You have to have like a lot of chemistry and a lot of teamwork, and everyone has to like buy into it, and like everyone has to put in the work to like consistently make all these things, like all the small things better that make a team like that function. And if the players don't really commit to it or don't want to or don't put in that much work to it, then it'll never work like the way it is supposed to.
So you kind of already answered this question, Legija, but I think for both of you guys,
You're lagging a second. We can't hear you.
Yeah.
Wait a sec. Wait a sec. Sometimes it happened on someone Insight the other day, so maybe it'll just be a second. Try talking now.
yeah. Hello?
Nah, it's still lagging a little bit.
All right. Well, that's interesting.
Wait a sec. Try now.
We'll try now and see if that's better.
Probably like-
It's still going
Can
in
I
and out. The
throw in
problem
a
is-
question to you too?
Yeah, go on. Ask one while we're waiting.
What do you think
His
is-
connection will fix in a second. Don't worry.
Yeah, it's fine. So let's speak for the last, I don't know, let's just take the last 6 months of Counter-Strike. What would you say is execute style, like how do you say, how did you call it? Like execute stylish with a lot of tactic after tactic, or would you say Counter-Strike today is easier to play like reactionary wise? And why would you think so, if I can ask?
I think
Did you
it's-
understand the question?
Yeah. Go
Yeah.
on, m1cks. You answer first. I'll
Okay.
go after, mate.
I think I think it does depend on the players a lot, obviously, and like the skill the players have and the experience you have. So like our team is like all 7 of us, like even me and like the coach, we don't have any of us have like super top level experience, right? Like playing big lands year to year, like every big event, whatever. And I think like the aggressive execute style really helps to cover some of the flaws with that lack of experience and other things. Um, and I think for our team it works really well because it allows us to cover up that up, especially on like the T side and stuff. I think I would prefer to have a style that's a bit in between. It's kind of like what MSL was, I think. Especially when I was in, it was a lot of like defaulting, and then just and then going into like the set execute or play and stuff like that. And I think that's something we're trying to get more lean towards too. But yeah, I think it really just depends on the players.
Yeah, one of the problems I think is like if you look at the teams that made it work, Astralis is the best example, but actually MSL teams, your big team, obviously are decent examples because actually they're teams that I think got to have better performances than they would have if you just played like FPL style. So the problem is those are all teams that keep a same core for a long time. So that's the problem of doing the burden of execution on that style is everyone has to know exactly what they're doing, the order that they do it in, and the reason that they do it. Right? That's really hard to make work. If I'm doing instead a lineup like I think of like some of Carrigan's teams. The reasons why those teams so often like immediately are good is because he just takes all of his fraggers and he usually has good fraggers and just says, right, what do you like to do? Right. He likes to be put into this situation. Let's just put him in that situation. Let's get a mid-round situation where he's taking the aim duel he wants to take and he's got his back covered. So they're not suddenly Nico, fucking m1cks, Rops, whoever it is, just goes off. It looks amazing. The problem, in my opinion, is first of all, it's really hard to do the execute style. And then secondly, how do we get all the new stars in the game? Just look at FaZe Clan. They all come from FPL. And FPL, you don't get noticed unless you're just a pop-off individual player. FPL's about like basically creating the best demo or movie highlight that you can. It's just popping off individually, making your own players, running through a smoke, shooting 3 people. Well, that's like almost the opposite of like structured traditional Counter-Strike. So as a result, not only are you going to have to basically, like you're saying, learn the game again to even learn that style, like you're going to think like, oh, I just do whatever I want on the round, right? It's like, no, bro. Like in this team, maybe all you do is follow this guy, right? In that scenario, not only is it going to be hard, but when you're trying to execute that style, you're also going to be playing players who do that. So the difference is execute Counter-Strike, like he was saying there about playing Astralis. Obviously, Astralis is much better, but what they're doing makes sense. Like, you know what you should do against it. There's a logic because they're following the same style, right? If you're playing against like, the classic example for me was if people remember Astralis before they had m1cks, when they had Kirby, the team that they just could not beat most times, occasionally they did, was SK Gaming, the Brazilians. And that's because the Brazilians had players who could just make their own play anytime they wanted. So you could be setting up for an awesome like tactic and some guy just pushes on you behind, like Fudge comes behind you, fucking Fallen comes out of a smoke and shoots you in mid and you're like, what? I haven't even started the tactic. Like that style is really, that's why it's so difficult in my opinion to make it work. Like everything about the scene makes it super tough. Do you have a different perspective like Legija?
One question quickly. Do you think it's worth taking like the time that it takes to obviously bring the team to this level to be able to play like more defaultish and reactionary Counter-Strike? Do you think it's worth taking this 3-6 months? Obviously, we don't have too much time in Counter-Strike. Tournaments are going, important qualifiers, player change. Then you have to reintroduce this guy because that was one big flaw for us or big issue for us in big. Every time we brought in a new player, we obviously try to implement or involve him in our style.
Trying to get him up to speed, exactly.
Exactly, which is for us obviously the best Counter-Strike to play in theory, but obviously the hardest Counter-Strike, and that's why I think many people tend to struggle back then when we picked them up in big. And obviously it was not their fault at all. It was maybe also our approach that we had to find a healthier balance between how to play the game, adapt a little bit to our new player. But since we always thought like it's the best way to play Counter-Strike reactionary, I think many people struggled with that. That's why I was asking, like, would you guys say, okay, just take your time and do it? Or like, obviously,
like you're saying, the org has to basically have faith in you because, like you're saying, like if you're in Counter-Strike as a player or a coach, you've got to win today. If you start losing for 3 months, you probably get fired. They probably replace a player. So even though you're trying to tell them, if you give me a year, at the end of a year, I might give you like the 3rd best team in the world. If they see that you're the 12th best team in the world, they'll probably just fire you or bring in a new player. And every time, as you say, there's the other problem, right? Counter-Strike especially, we chop and change players very quickly because it's the easiest way to make a team good quick. The problem is it doesn't make you good long-term, though. You know, so it's like I feel like we're just not a professional enough sport that you can build up a team that way yet. You can do it in rare cases like the one you were in, but like a lot of the teams, I understand why they just change players.
Yes. Mix, I
The
guess.
time to make the like unique changes to a roster or to continue building like the long term.
It means to get your
Yeah.
style and play, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It feels like everything's kind of like in a purgatory. You're kind of stuck around like where you were before all the lands kind of came crashing down to like a certain extent, obviously, unless you just completely crash or something. I also think it still can be really tough though to implement a style like that, even if it's like all online, because you are playing like a ton of matches, and it's like it can be even harder to like get practice time in at times during some of these online events when you're just playing like every other day. So in theory, it could be a better time to like get that style to work, but it also could be a lot harder if you're just constantly playing matches and people are just constantly up to date on what you're doing and everything.
So sorry about that. I was muted while I was trying to fix things on Discord.
It's all right.
But
It works now anyway.
Yeah, the question was basically that he was responding to was, isn't this pandemic a good time because teams are not making a lot of roster changes to sort of integrate and really flesh out the style that a roster has? You know, I think, like, are you guys using this time period differently? I know some for you, Legija, some of your players are back in Europe right now, so it's a lot bit more challenging. But how are you guys kind of optimizing this pandemic time for developing your teams?
I actually think.
Oh, sorry, you mix.
Oh, okay. I actually think overall, it actually has been a lot easier online to like change your style play like bigger changes, like more drastic changes, long-term changes, definitely, than it was like land bouncing from land to land. So still a lot of matches, but I do think changing the overall way you play and like adding things is easier in this environment.
Well, for us, it was just pretty much too hard to practice because Calix was stuck in London. We had to figure out the apartment for NPC and everything, so we just started practicing 4 days ago, I think. And well, we don't really have too much time to change our game. We just improved that what we had pretty much, change a little bit here and there, but yeah, we only have like 8 days total, I think, until the qualifier, so it's not gonna be enough time for us to change. And also with the time zones and time difference, the Europeans stay always up until 12, and that's our practice time, like from 5 to 12. But we focus more on our game that we had. It's not gonna be enough time. But if I can quickly throw in the question why I asked it before with what do you think is the better game style? So I've been thinking a lot of it, obviously. What is the best way to play Counter-Strike? And I think that we are now how many years into Counter-Strike Go? 6 years, kinda. Let's say 4 years where it's like kind of competitive, or 3.5, 3 or 4 years probably. I figured out that teams became so good, and the options that teams have, or the meta that that Counter-Strike is being played right now, isn't changing too fast compared to like how it was 2 years ago or 1 year ago even. So I think that if you're, let's say you're a terrorist and you play a certain tactic or a certain default, it's way easier for the CT, for the Ts these days. Let's talk about Inferno. You do the long smoke. You always know the reactions from the enemies these days, so you can way easier adapt to that and play with these rotations from the enemies. They are limited in positions, meta positions right now. That's why I think the way Counter-Strike is the best way to play right now. I think it's like reactionary because it's so stale for the CTs. There's not much adversity or new ideas that people can bring up because so many ideas being fought already in these 5 years or 4 years that we're having really competitive Counter-Strike. And that was like my thought process behind that, because executes always look the same, so it's easier for the CTs to adapt to that and just make small changes. But for the CTs if you play all the time default, you're able to fake a little bit more. But I in general think that the CTs have a way harder time. That's why I think also on CT maps back then, it's now where it was 11-4, 10-5 maps. These days it's like 7-8, 8-7. Even
almost
TT favored, like Inferno. Teams win like 10, 11 rounds on Inferno, which was back then impossible. Like it was a 13-2, 12-3, 11-4 half. You were happy having 5 rounds. And that's why I think, and that I think also has transitioned into other maps as well. And I just wanted to know what you guys think about that.
I mean, I'll throw in another angle. Like, first of all, the economy has never been worse for CTs than it is now relative to the overall game. So already you can't afford to die.
If you win pistol and like they get the bomb down on CT, like it's almost impossible to win the second round, like against 2 AKs and a Galil. Like I just lose it every time.
And then the other part is, because that basically means, this is the part that's changed about Counter-Strike. Now, it's not about winning the round, it's about keeping people alive and winning the round. That's a totally different game plan. That makes it way harder to execute CT side, what you want to do. But then secondly, if you kill someone, like Legija is saying, like you basically just push an area, you catch them on a rotation, moving back, you kill 1 or 2 CTs, they're probably just safe. Like you basically half won the round. Like in a normal game of Counter-Strike 2 years ago, it's a retake now. You have to still like shoot the people. If the best players are still alive, you might lose the fucking game. Now, half the teams won't even go for it on some of these maps. And then the other angle as well. What was the other part as well? That might just be actually. That might be it, to be fair.
Yeah, like it's not worth going for, even like 4v4s, 3v3s. Like unless you have like a positional advantage or like they're low or something, or you have like good utility. It's like a lot of the time it's not even worth going for it if it's an even situation. Like you're like 3v3s, 4v4s, you'll just see teams like back off instantly a lot of the time now.
It's interesting. One thing that I learned from GOP also, like regarding this case, for instance, we are in a 3v3 situation or even 4v3 situations, but they have like, let's say, Mirage B bomb site. It's very hard for you to retake. You have one guy low HP, no equipment, no utility. They still have equipment, for example. We always said, like, just fuck it. Give him this round. It's fine. They just win 1 round.
Yes.
Just win 1 round. It doesn't matter. It's just 1 round on the scoreboard. It won't have a too big of an impact. Obviously, depending a little bit on the score, but it's start of the game, 4-4 score. Yeah, it's okay. It's 4-5. I don't care. But next round, I have money. I can break you again. I will break your money if I win the next round.
Because as far as I was watching FaZe versus someone on Mirage, and like the first gun round on FaZe's CT side, they just put 4A, like double up, like full utility, everything. They just put like 4 on A, and they just put Bimus on B by himself, and just like if they go B, like we're just gonna save. Like it doesn't matter. Like it'll go from like 12-7 to 12-8. Our economy will be fine. And I think a lot of teams are starting to do that a lot more.
Nice.
Right, got any questions, Monty?
Yes. Let's talk about this. So Lamzat asks, to improve, it is clear that watching demos is the major factor. Many people, including Valens, the previous C9 coach, said that it's difficult to strategize given the current CSGO replay system because it's unoptimized. Now, there are a bunch of third-party tools that make it a lot easier to watch the demos. So to improve efficiently, what do you guys think? What do you guys do in terms of your kind of demo reviewing in order to improve your teams?
The important thing for me is just like understanding like why a round happens. Like if I go back and watch a team, that's the most that I gain from demos really from my end. If I'm watching if I'm not prepping, if I'm just like watching a different team in a demo, I really need to see like why the rounds are happening and like what things I can get from that, like rotations and like even stuff like before I would, if I wanted to watch like Astralis versus G2 on Nuke and see how Astralis played, I would go like watch the 2 Nuke games G2 played before that, and I would see how like Astralis prepared for them, like with the context of their previous Nuke games and stuff like that. So I think from like a coach perspective, it's different from like a player perspective, but from a coach perspective, it's more just understanding why things are happening in a game when I go back and watch a demo. And if he was asking about the software stuff, like this CSGO DMUI is like really bad. The one I kind of always recommend to people, especially for like more amateur people, is like Gnosis. I think is really good. It's like a 2D thing that really helps with demo watching and things like that.
For me personally, like, is the question about how do I improve? What ways do I have to improve my team?
Using
demos to improve. Yeah.
Well, we don't watch. I don't like too much watching other demos together with my team, just for one reason, because we have one word that I learned also is result oriented. So I explained it quickly. If I watch a demo, for example, and I see device makes a sick 3K, oh shit, this was a sick move. But don't be result oriented. Think first, was he lucky? Did the enemy make a mistake? Did he play insanely well? And many people don't see that, which is not a big deal, but like it's fine for me. I understand it's sometimes hard to see. I sometimes don't even see it. But if I say my teammate, okay, watch a demo from Rain. Rain, for example, on Mirage plays very loose. He plays a lot on timing, a lot on communication from his team. He will save his smokes, and I tell my teammate, okay, watch Rain demos and see how he plays. And then I watch him in practice, and he throws randomly smokes ramp, just like Rain does. And he says, yeah, Rain does it as well. But bro, why does Rain do it? That's what you need to understand. That's why I'd like to personally go rather watch our own demos, watch and learn from our own mistakes. Because how can I say it? Counter-Strike these days, as I said earlier, there's only certain options that you do, and most of the people always play the same stuff. And it's like reactionary, like Rain plays, for example, it's reactionary. This happens on the map, I have to do this. This happens on the map, I can push here. And that's why I don't like too much to let my team watch the demos on their own. So we more watch our own games. We record every practice, and after practice, I write during the practice I write down the rounds, and after that we talk about them. Small mistakes, big mistakes, and if it takes 30 minutes to talk about these mistakes, we do that. And important for me also, what I always say to my team, if you make a mistake that's like team play based, you forgot throwing a flash, or you didn't have a good crossfire or communication after you split your crossfire and go like in two different directions, try to implement these mistakes that you did, or what I tell you, try to implement it in other maps as well. These scenarios can happen thousands of times on 1,000 different positions, and that's the most important thing. Don't only think when I tell you this was a mistake only on this position. It's a mistake that you can do anywhere. If you don't communicate with the teammate correctly, it doesn't mean you only don't talk in this position with them wrong. So I try to take the mistake on one position, like also transition it into other maps that they overall learn, like the idea of the mistake, or the deep thing of the mistake.
Yeah, like the philosophy of Counter-Strike.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah, some players will see a situation like that, and it was a problem with previous teams where they review a round like that and they think like too specifically about that round rather than like how does this apply like overall to our philosophy of Counter-Strike.
Nice.
Yeah, I would say, by the way, because I know the person asking, like, it sounded like they wanted to relate this to their own game. That this is why whenever I give advice, the advice I always give to improve is watch your own demo. But the key thing when you watch your own demo, because no one does it, by the way, like you wouldn't believe how many top pros who get paid mega bucks won't watch their own demos. They might do it if the coach watches like Legija and gives them tips, but most of the greatest players in the world never put time in the film room. The reason you watch your own demo, you have to do it though, like Legija says, never be results oriented. He didn't give the other side of that as well. So in the same way as when you watch your demo back and you watch a round, you don't look at the round where you die because you turned left and the guy came in 1 second at the wrong timing. That's just timing. That can happen.
Yes.
You don't think that. But you also don't do the other thing. You don't take the round where you got a 3K, but you actually misplayed your position and fucked up your smoke and you just shot them in the head. You don't take that and go, well, I did it right there. No, you're actually ignoring the results. You're looking at the decision making. That's the key thing. You want to ask yourself, why did I put myself in this position? Why did I make this choice? And as a result, by the way, there will be times if you do it right. There's actually something that one of the reasons I've always been a fan of MSL as an IGL. I've seen games where he just didn't have the best players in the server. So he lost the game, but actually, you know, the 8 T rounds he got, he probably called 13 good T rounds. Like he made the right decision in the initial round. It's just at the end of the round, the guy didn't win a 1v1. Someone pushed through a smoke. Like these things, you don't take that and write down, never do it because they can push through a smoke. No, as he's saying, you're trying to define your philosophy of the game. And so especially as he says there as well, it won't apply just to that situation. You're trying to make your general game better in all scenarios. So that's a little bit more general because I'm trying to give it if like a fan wants to improve. But like that will be way better to improve than watching like a demo, as he says, of like fucking simple wrecking everyone on Mirage and FPL game. You won't be able to do or know any of the things he's doing there. Even if you try to copy it, you might literally just be like someone just like that fucking famous study where they took pigeons, right? And they would give pigeons a piece of corn if they pressed the button. And later they figured out, if you just don't even put the button there, if you just throw a piece of corn every now and then, the pigeon just thinks, right, whatever I just did got me corn. So if I was stood on one leg, stand on one leg gets me corn. So they just keep doing that over and over. And it just fucked their brains. Like the point is, if you do this the wrong way, it'll ruin your game. If you do it the right way, it will literally, inarguably make you better.
Improve, yeah.
Yeah, I think also that this is just true of any sport. Like if you look at any great athlete, they spent a lot of time reviewing the film of their own games. And I think Thorin brings up a really good point about not tying the results to the fact that you need to analyze the decision making. Also, I think just as an interesting comment on esports, I actually believe that this is one of the reasons why RTS games are no longer popular, because it is basically an RTS. It is mandatory replay review and film review in order for any player to improve
Every
their
player
play.
does it, even at tournaments, right after the game. They all sit there and do it like four times speed or whatever. Yeah, it's famous.
Yeah, I think like especially for the casual fan who just kind of wants to move on.
Who the fuck wants to do that?
Yeah,
exactly.
blame their. Yeah, it's way easier. It's way easier. Let's just put it this way: it's way easier if I come home after work and I smoke a joint and I'm playing a team game just to be like, well, fuck my teammates. I'm just going to go into the next game. They were the problem the whole time. In RTS, if you're a player and you come home and you play that game and you lose, like you basically are just like, shit. It's all my fault, and the only way to improve is to watch me losing again. And I think that's why RTS isn't popular anymore. I do understand it's a stressful experience, even though I am a deep RTS lover myself.
Because here's the funny thing, though, is actually I even think Legia's hit a key point there. Even pros often don't understand this because they do the wrong approach that I said. They watch the demo and think I'm just memorizing things that happened. Like, right, Rain kills 3 people when he's in the corner there. No. So as a result, like I remember there was a famous story, right, where in 2017, when Fur played probably the most insane style of Counter-Strike ever, where everyone knows on CT side of Overpass, he would just push A in the bathrooms 24/7, but no one could stop him. You couldn't. Even if you knew he was coming, he would just find somehow a timing to get in on that spot, right? Right? Well, when people said, oh, is he doing it because, like, you know, maybe he studied the opponent and he knows, like, what rounds they go there, or he's read something? He actually said in an interview, no, in fact, the opposite. I think it was Fallen first said he didn't want to be told things about the opposition just because it'd get in his head. Now, here's the thing. I know what Fur means. In the short-term, basic way, like results-oriented, he's right. If he thinks, oh, he's definitely going to be there, it's going to change the way you go around that corner. But where Fur was wrong is if Fur had studied the tendencies of the opponent, that would make him better at doing that style. It would actually make him unbeatable, basically.
100% agree.
So we're going to get through some questions quickly here. So just to be clear, Calix is playing CS Summit from London, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And Mishu from Poland.
Fair enough. So Michu from Poland. So that will be quite challenging given the ping from Eastern Europe to California, I imagine, where CS Summit is being held. On this note, people are asking about Flashpoint 2. Well, we're still looking at September, although we haven't locked.
That's all we know.
It's going to happen. We're hoping it happens in September. Obviously, Valve has not come up with any kind of updates regarding the major or the RMR events, so we can't really know at this point in time. There's also the other problem, which is this is tying into where are Calix and Mihu playing from, and currently, unless you're an American citizen, you cannot travel from the UK or mainland Europe to the United States. Now, I will say that FACEIT is working on this, and you can fly to Mexico and then stay there for 2 weeks and then enter the United States. So this might be a solution. So all of our European players / talent like Thorin may be getting 2 weeks in a Mexican resort or something like that. I don't know. Could be worse. So
we'll see about that.
We'll see about that. Hopefully,
you might have to sell me on the idea I have to go to Mexico, stay there, and then go to LA in the current climate. Like, yeah, we'll see about that. We'll see. I might be doing that online as well. I'll have a look.
That's fair. But it's also 3 months from now, so we'll see what the travel restrictions are. But we will have to figure that out, obviously. But I'm just saying there are potential solutions to that problem. That may result in a vacation for a complimentary vacation for people. So yeah, that's where we're at with that right now. Obviously, everyone is in this same boat when it comes to organizing Counter-Strike events, but we will figure it out in the long run. Let's see here. I mean, I assume the answer is because they were better, but why did you go for European players like Mihu and Calix instead of NA players? Was it
I
mentality
mean, to be
based?
fair, like one thing I would say is Legia's from Europe. He knows
Yep.
the European scene. He's not these fucking Americans who are in tier 2. Like, why would he go for those players? Like he says, he already wanted Calix in the team, so it makes perfect sense to me. Thoughts? Do you actually know the NA scene, Legia? I don't personally. Like all these Triumph guys, I'm finding out about them now. I don't know these fucking guys.
Well, obviously I know like the bigger teams, but from teams like Triumph, where you have also players like what's his name, Grim, for example, who's been showing that he's actually really fucking good.
Looks good, yeah.
But I think it's good to have this balance. Obviously, I played already in a European, North American team already before, and I think the way of how European Counter-Strike in general plays and the attitude that the players have, which is the most important thing for me, the attitude that the players have, is so different. And I think that the European mentality is just in general a little bit better in terms of respecting teammates, not only teammates, also the other people. In America, it's like, how can I explain it? Like in Germany, for example, we have this thing that, which obviously was also a big mistake from us, from the players that have been on the top in Germany, that we kind of ignore the other teams and not necessarily talk them down, but don't give them the opportunity. And I think that's a big issue in North America, that I'm not going to name any people, but they always think too high of themselves and don't give other people the opportunity, and they're just not going to learn. People just not going to learn. And if I take a tier 2 European player or a tier 2 North American player, the difference in knowledge will be so big.
Yes.
Where the European will just have a little bit more experience because they have more competition. They have FPLC. FPLC, in my opinion, is stronger than the North American FPL. And I just think that for me, where I don't have too much time to form a team, and I obviously have to perform, as we said earlier, a little bit faster, and I don't have the time, like 3 months, 6 months, to make my team where I want it to be, it just made sense for me to take Europeans. And also the market in North America. I mean, I can make a North American team probably with five American players that is similar good as my team, but I just didn't have the players or the options to pick.
Sure.
But in the end, it showed like people like Zeppa, for example, or as I said, Grim, very, very good players, but I obviously didn't know too much of them.
Yeah.
No, that's one thing to say, by the way. Just on what Monty said. Monty's joking there. But by the way, that joke actually isn't even accurate in my opinion. Like, NA players are the most underrated skilled players in the entire world. Like, as you've seen from fuckers like Grim and Zeppa, who were nobody a month and a half ago. These motherfuckers are better than like some active EU pros right now.
I mean, we saw that in Flashpoint 1.
Yeah, but the difference is what Legija says. The difference is those European players, Denmark's the best example. People who've played in the 5th best Danish team have run real tactics, real practices, been to LANs, like their level of experience is so far above the like rising talents in NA that like that's the big difference to me. It's not about skill at all. I think there's some super skilled players out there.
And you also have to take in consideration, if I, for example, take a North American player who doesn't have that much experience, I still have so much more to explain him to get to the level of Counter-Strike that I want to play. That's why, for example, let's take a team like Swole Patrol or the Triumph now, for example. They are not the smartest players. They are not. But obviously they had, now that lately they had success. Obviously they will not be bad players. But if I change their game style, their box, so basically their box is very small, but their box is very, very strong. My box is bigger, but overall, how can I say it, stronger than yours. But your little box, if you play with your little box in my box, you will beat me probably. Let's say aiming wise. Yeah, you will probably be aiming wise better. I will lose some duels against you. But if I outplay you, there's nothing you can do. You cannot out aim me if I outplay you, if I flash you, if I play anti against you. And that's why they take so much more time to adapt to this Counter-Strike and to get to this level of Counter-Strike. And European players, it's just nature for us. Like, it's in general, European players or European Counter-Strike is a little bit more structured. Communication is a little bit better than in NA. But I don't want to take like the ability or the skill of the North American players. Not at all. They're really good players, seriously. And I can make a team that I have right now without European players, just with NA players. But I just think for me, it's faster to have European players and improve faster.
If you want to have someone who's really good in the short term, have someone who can just put a crosshair on someone and win an aim duel 8 times out of 10. But if you want to be a great player and a great team, you have to be able to beat players like that. Like if you play simple, the person on your team isn't as skilled. So now you have to flash him, smoke him, get someone behind him, do a crossfire. Like that's how you beat someone who's got skill at that. But that you can see those are like different skill sets. Like, you're not going to learn that playing Pogs. You're doing the opposite in Pogs, unfortunately.
Exactly.
What do you think, Mix?
I definitely agree. I actually think it's been varied from team to team in my experience, bouncing around from some teams in NA. Like Rogue was obviously really good with MSL in terms of like the mindset and the drive and all that stuff. I went from there to United, which is like a lot worse in terms of that. And this team I actually have to give a lot of credit because their mindset in terms of everything like that and like European mindset improving, all that, all those things. I think this team is actually like collectively like all really good at it, good at that. It's improving together like that. So yeah, I think it's definitely tough to put like European players together and NA players and keep going with that, but yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Let's move on to some other questions then. Would we consider implementing a system where all team matchups are randomized a couple hours or before so there's less anti-stratting? No. First off, that would piss off the teams.
Yeah.
And second off, anti-stratting is part of what's interesting about watching Counter-Strike. So we actually want less RNG in our results, not more RNG. We want to have the best teams win. So no, that I think that would just make everybody angry, including me. For Mix, what is something within the C9 infrastructure that has made an active impact into the improvement of the new C9 over the ATK roster? So as the organization, let me translate that. Has the organization done anything that has made measurable improvements on the skill that was present in ATK?
Well, one thing that'll sound small but is actually a really big help is before our coach now, TC, was actually like the coach, manager, and chef of the team all at the same time. So not having to do that anymore with C9 is, I'm sure, helps him a lot. It lets him do his job a lot better as a coach. Other than that, so that's a big thing. Obviously, having the house and being here in LA and everything is all, and like
I've got an
like
angle to ask you about. What about this? Isn't like Valens and having access to all this data tech and stuff, isn't that something different?
Well, Valens is on EG, so.
Oh, sorry, I forgot about that. And
Yeah.
didn't you have someone as well, though? Don't you have
C9 has someone,
data
but I
scientists?
think it was more newer, and they'd still been working with leagues,
fair
so
enough, then.
we haven't really
I just
been able to work
heard
with them.
something like that.
Yeah, the plan is to work with them in the future once like we actually can. But yeah, Valens was doing that for C9 before, then he went to EG to do that. So I haven't really seen any of that stuff. But I think it could help a lot.
Same question to you, Legija, coming from Big. Now that you're on Envy, what is the organization provided to you that you were lacking before?
I mean, we didn't really lack too much.
Got some money now.
Yeah, money. Money's a good part. Yeah.
Obviously, there will be a difference, but we didn't really lack anything. Like actually, the support that we had in Big for what they have was like mind blowing. We were coached every day.
You had a very good infrastructure, right?
Very good. Like actually, very, very, very good.
Great.
And kudos to those people. But obviously in MB we have our office, like things like them flying us with a private jet. Obviously these are big things. It's just nice to have that support, and also manager wise you have everything is handled for you. I mean, I didn't really have too many issues infrastructure wise in Big, so it didn't change too much for me. But obviously having an office and physical coaching and mental coaching obviously helps a lot, and these are the kind of things that obviously Big we actually had one mental coach, but it wasn't for a too long time, and I think that can help, and it does help for sure.
One of the comments that was earlier on, which I just thought was funny, pointing out how the Astralis players went from TSM to Astralis, so they've kind of had some bad luck in terms of ownership.
Out of the frying pan into the fire.
Exactly. I do want to ask you guys, though, my own question, as this news is kind of broken this week, and as we see the substitute players coming in and players taking breaks, do you think this is the end of this group of the kind of 5 core Astralis players playing together, or do you think that there's a possibility that they're going to come back either as part of this organization or another one with the same 5, or is it just over right now, do you think?
By the way, he's just saying to speculate there. You don't have to
Yes.
have like secret info.
I have
Obviously.
no
Just
secret
what your
info.
guess would be, you know.
My guess would be like eventually they all end up back together. Like I don't see like as those 5 people in Sonic like how you could never play again together. Like after all the success you had, for it to end like this and never even like try it again or with a new org or anything, like I don't see how that would ever make sense.
In my opinion, obviously we don't know what is going inside the team. Like fuck everything else, organization, blah 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 blah. And as you said, like you say, for example, if you had this success, you have to obviously try it again. I don't think personally, if you have like really deep issues and problems inside the team, it's very hard to fix those issues. I mean, obviously they seem to be grown people and good people, and they can work with these issues. But if something is there and it's really deep, which I think or I can imagine it is, otherwise it wouldn't have happened how it happened. Outside of the aspect what happens inside the organization, I don't know, and I don't want to know. But I don't think they will be coming together again in a different org or anything. I don't know. Might be. Obviously, it will be good for them. It will be smart, but we don't know what's happening inside the team. And if they really have any deep issues, I personally wouldn't. Because looking at the Danish talent pool, you can replace some of those people.
Yeah, of course.
You can. Obviously, you will fall down a little bit and back down, but Astralis hasn't always been the number one. Obviously, they've been on the top.
Yeah, of course.
But if you have the core of Device, Dupree, and whoever it is,
Glaive, probably.
I don't care, probably Glaive, I would say, then they will bring 2 other players in, and it won't be too big of an issue for them to become number one again. Like they can anytime become number one if they're the core of the team.
Along these lines of what Legija is saying now, I know in everyone's minds we all think of Astralis like 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, who were like unbeatable. But first of all, like they weren't even that Astralis recently this year. They were already having problems. But I'm with m1cks. Like I personally would never break that lineup up until I at least play the next major. Like one thing you never want to do, like everyone knows who watched that Last Dance documentary. Even though I personally don't think the Chicago Bulls would have won again, they barely won that year. You at least want to be beaten and know that there's not a what if and be like, right, well, now at least I know I couldn't have won. So there's nothing to torture myself about. So first of all, I have a rule that until a winning lineup stops winning, you should never break it up. Once it stops winning, do what you want. But that's the key point, what Legija is saying as well. They're from the most talent-rich scene in the world. Like, first of all, there's even young players who are on the rise who you could bring up. Like, obviously, Mad Lion's got a bunch of them. But forget that. Think of established names. What you're telling me, if I was told tomorrow, right, you can have Device, Glaive, and m1cks, but you've got to get 2 more players, but you've got unlimited money. Listen, the second part's of Strawman, but I'm just saying this, right? Tomorrow I would go, right, Config and Valde, come on in, mate. Let's go. That immediately could be a number 1 lineup right there. Like, there's so much talent. It's fucking bonkers in that team. So
you can take any three of those.
That's why I'm asking whether you think it makes sense that it's exactly these 5 players, or whether there's a world where several of them split off and then add some more funds.
Assuming the major happens this year, I assume based on contracts they will play it. So I think they'll still play the next major. But if I had to guess, next year, this is pure speculation, next year they will either play together as the same 5 for a different organization, or a couple of them will be sold, or they'll replace players in Australia. I think those are the 3 most likely. I think personally, the likelihood that all 5 come back, not only play the next major, but play all next year, I think that's super unlikely personally. And plus, forget the Astralis org shit. Lineups just don't last that long. Like, it's very rare that you get like a Virtus Pro that lasts like 3 or 4 years. Like, it's and by the way, one of the reasons I think those lineups last that long isn't the angle they tell you that like we're just good guys who always work our problems out. It's like, who did you have to replace each other? When you're in a scene where you've got all these killers who, remember, if you start to go down, they just beat you in their other teams. So now you definitely want to recruit them. So in my opinion, it's almost an inevitability they'll just change the team, or they'll decide it was the org and they'll go as a whole team to another org and give it one last go there. I think that's the most plausible outcome personally.
Because either way, they could be super successful still, obviously. They're all just incredible people, so... But like, you
also
can take
pretty young generally.
Yeah, like you can take any 3 of those players from Astralis and just add like 2 decent Danish players to it, and there's always like potential for an error there, I think.
No.
Keywords, decent Danish players.
Decent.
So people were asking about the possibility of like player-owned teams. Let me just kind of go through that real quick. Player-owned teams are always going to be super hard because the players can't own all of the team, basically, because they need other people to be involved to run the operational and business side of the team. So they're always going to have to split it up. And the other problem with any player-owned team is, as soon as, with the number of roster moves that happen within Counter-Strike, okay, so let's say they make a roster move and a player that owns the team then goes to another team. Well, then they have to give up their equity stake within the team. And, like, does that go to the new player that signed? It's just kind of a shit show. So, like, I just don't think it's really feasible from a company structure perspective to have that. It's been one of the issues with having player equity in any esport in the world, has been, as soon as you go to that different team, you have to give it up, right? Because otherwise there's competitive integrity issues at stake. So my answer is no. I think that players should be aiming to, if I'm giving advice to a player, my advice to them is, get as much money as you can. Don't worry about the equity. When you retire, then try and angle to get equity as a coach or a manager.
Then do it.
Then do it. Like, if you're like, well, I got maybe another year in me, and I'm going to make a deal where I can transition into a management role within the company afterwards, then sure, go for it. Like, that's fine.
By the way, I've got one thing to say on that whole topic of being player-owned. It's going to be a joke, by the way, but just get ready. Now, obviously, this might surprise people, because me and Richard were a big part of making people aware that they weren't properly player-owned, like they pretended from day one. But with that said, why does everyone now always say that Astralis isn't a player-owned org? Those players are getting owned like motherfuckers every day. What are you talking about?
That's what I tweeted the other day. That was exactly my tweet the other day when that news came out, was that I thought Astralis confused player owned with players getting owned. That was the big difference right there. But yes, I totally agree. But yeah, I think it's tough. People are asking, why is Taco on the board of governors? Wouldn't that be a conflict of interest? Okay, guys.
This is what tilts me, right? This is what tilts me. In every other circumstance except Flashpoint, they want players to be the God Emperor who decides everything. They want players to just be able to pause around like, do we agree? Agree with me right now. We start the map again. Like, they want all sorts of crazy shit power to players. That's so beyond the bounds of what players should have. But if it's Flashpoint, right, in my brain, everything Flashpoint is bad. So if they give players power, I must be against player power. What the hell? Now I hate players. Like, this is the dumbest shit ever. The reason why those players have power is not my choice. I wouldn't give these motherfuckers one iota of power. I would say, left click the mouse, dickhead. That's your job. I talk and think. I would stick with that. But in the world that we live in now, players have incredible influence.
Yes.
So actually, the reason you give players power is a compromise to the community, that at least the player gets a say in the rules, right? That makes the fan think, oh, well, the players are happy with the rules. So I would say that's generally they're not like deciding everything, guys. They're just going to give their thoughts and say, I think, those rules aren't good, or maybe in this scenario that's going on now, there might be, maybe they'd have a better solution that we can suggest.
Yeah, exactly. I think that really, somebody has to represent the players in the board of governors. So, I don't really think it's a big issue, because if Taco does things that benefit MIBR, we have 4 other people to be like, I don't think so, Taco. Like,
I think it's the name governor. That's what's getting them. Like fucking Freiburg, isn't it? Like, well, I tell you, Bradley, the way that you're playing the game is not correct. But like, it's not like that. He's not some fucking plantation owner. We're talking obviously just about like he's just on a board advising them, isn't he? He's not making the decisions.
Right, and it also he's not the only one who would be doing that. And also, hopefully, I would think that Freiburg and Taco would take their jobs as representatives of all players of partner teams in Flashpoint seriously and get the feedback. We also do have to work with the CSPPA guys, so it's not like, there's many checks and balances here in order to make this process. So no, I don't think it's a conflict of interest. We have to have somebody, so, trust us that we're not just going to do things because Taco says so.
And one more joke. Why are you worried about Taco? He won't do anything biased to MIBR, because that might not work for the other team that he actually has a stake in. So naturally, that will offset each other. So don't worry, he'll make it good for the whole scene, for all the teams. Maybe the teams we don't even know he owns. So
We should just make him the commissioner.
It's true. So here's a question. So obviously, the admin decisions about MIBR on Blast, super interesting to talk about. So as my job as commissioner, to prove how Flashpoint works, which is often different than the way other organizations work. So in other leagues, what happens is some random dude from outside comes in and makes a bunch of really dumb decisions without being educated on what the scene and the people who are really endemic to that scene operate. So instead of you guys asking me what should be done about this scenario. I am going to ask you what you think should be done about this scenario as Counter-Strike experts, and then I can take that feedback and then use it to make a rational decision for Flashpoint and Counter-Strike. So this is going to be an example of how we do things here. So what do you guys, as Counter-Strike experts...
By the way, just as a preamble, in case people didn't see this on Twitter, I would recommend, if you're interested in that particular drama and that exact ruling, the best thread on Twitter was by Mikał, the guy who's like a Polish admin, who's been an admin for ESL for a long time. And I will say, actually, even though they were part of the problem back in the days when players had absurd power, ESL admins generally are some of the best in the business. Like, they've had many of the best tournaments for many years, and they do actually enforce their rules. Like, they have punished people, for example, for talking during fucking tech timeouts, fallen. Yeah, that's called cheating, mate. So they actually have punished these people. So, but fair play to them. And he made a thread where he explains like the problems with that rule, basically. And the problem with the rule is it was an arbitrary rule from a long time ago that doesn't apply to every case, but has to be applied to every case the way we currently enforce it. So that's why players aren't totally wrong. Players know it's too arbitrary. What they're wrong about is they don't get to be the ones who are the judge. I don't mind them saying to the admin, this was the info, and then the admin being the judge. That's different. So I want to know what these guys think, actually, because obviously within teams, I'm sure there's lots of different opinions. Like, where do you guys go on it? How do we fix problems going forwards in this sense?
I think it's just be simple, just follow the rule and admin's decision. What I hate about the worst part about it is it just happened with if you remember like Immortals and C9 back in like Northern Arena, like something very similar to the admin team.
Yeah.
And it's like both teams, like they both opted like, okay, we'll restart the round. But it's like when you first get asked, you're like, well, that's not what the rule says, so it's kind of bullshit if we have to restart.
It is, yeah.
But then an entire community comes attacking you, and so you effectively restart the round, but then it doesn't matter that you restart at that point because everyone hates you by that point in Israel. So I think it should just be admin.
Yeah, I think in this case also 100% the admin is the saying. How I take it as a team, that's on me. I can just have to shut the fuck up and keep focusing and okay, I lost the round, fuck it, guys. But if I keep complaining about it and start going into a war, into a fight with the admins, go out, Discord, talk there, it's just not gonna get me anywhere. In the end, I don't know what's the outcome. And I think personally, the admins, why do we have referees or admins? You guys make the decisions. If something is in the rule book and something weird happened that you might have to change the rule. In this case, I think it's the damage happened. The rules say, okay, once damage happens, we keep playing this round. Simple as that. That's the fucking rule. But there is some situations, like for example, the Olaf boost on overpass. That's something where the admin has to take a decision.
Yes.
In the end, made it, and everyone has to just agree on that.
Here's the irony, Monty. As an American sports fan, and especially an NFL fan, you should appreciate this. We're the only sport in the world where the admins are too pussy to ruin the fucking game with all their godlike decisions where they just play God with the game. Like, we don't have some motherfucker who just does a no-call like that Saints versus whatever Vikings. We don't have those assholes. I want someone like that. I want someone who will literally say, like here's the thing, right? As an NBA fan, I hate Joey Crawford. He's one of the biggest wankers to ever walk this earth. But one thing I appreciate is that he doesn't give a fuck what any fan or player thinks. He will literally just toss out the foot like LeBron James or something and just be like, get the fuck out.
Was that the guy that tossed out Tim Duncan for like smiling on the bench?
Yes.
Yeah, that was him, right? Yeah.
Because he's the most infamous for being like this. But what I'm saying is I don't like the decisions he took, but I like the fact he took the decision, if you know what I mean. Like, he's decisive. Like, at least that way I can trust that he's going to do what he thinks is right.
Yeah,
and I also think what you mentioned, Tori, I think in a tweet where you said like back then that players just threatened the admins.
That, yeah.
Yes, and I think that we as the players, I'm speaking, I'm not one of those big players, but whatever. I think that we still kind of have this mentality, and
that's what they tried to do on Twitter, basically. You know.
Yes, and that these days the tournament organizers, they can just say fuck it. Okay, yes, you are MIBR, but I can just bring in a different team.
Yes,
I'm not losing too much as I did back then. So go fuck yourself, and either you play and follow my rules, or you just don't play it and get the fuck off. That's how I
put it its way. Like, I alluded to this on Twitter. It used to be so bad back in 1.6. I'll give a couple of very quick anecdotes without going too deep. Right, there was a certain big name team. They might have come from Ukraine and been sponsored by Arbalest. Don't want to give away too much information there. They would literally do shit like the game time said 9 a.m. start time. They would arrive in the building at 9:15 a.m. By the way, 10 minutes late, you're supposed to get a penalty. They would arrive late, start setting up, and if an admin came up to them, they would literally tell them, like, I'll just leave the tournament right now if you don't let us play. Like, if you give us a penalty, we'll leave right now. Because they were the biggest team in the world. And so what they were doing with that admin was basically saying, like a fucking Karen, like, can I talk to your manager, please? Like, and you're just going to get in trouble then. So the admin would just think, fuck it, I'll just let him get, whatever, they're here, let's let the game start. Similarly, there would be insane stories where, like, especially online games, dude, everyone who loves those CS royalty, like Forest and all those classic players, these motherfuckers used every edge they ever had in an online game. They would literally just lie and say stuff like, oh, my ping's bad to that server. Get onto a server where they had like 10 ping and you had 40, when they could have played on a server where you both had like 20. And then they would just absolutely wreck you. And at the end, all the fans would go, haha, you got wrecked by Forest. It's like, Forest basically fucking like pushed the limits of the rules on that one, mate. Like, that's fucked up. But the problem is, as much as it's the fault of the player, the ultimate fault is the admin. Like, if the admin had just said to Forest, fuck off then. If you want to forfeit the game, that'll have to be on you, mate. Then Forest would have had to get in line. But as long as he bows to what Forest says, well, yeah, then Forest can do whatever the fuck he wants. You don't give people that power is basically the point.
I also think that one of the general problems with esports rules is that too many organizations try and go by the letter of the rules rather than the spirit of the rules. And I think that one of the issues and why they do that is because there isn't sort of a philosophy that's encoded in the rules. I think that one of the things that I would like to do with Flashpoint is say, here is our, like, within the rule book, say literally, here is our philosophy on how these games should be played, and this is the overarching vision of the rules. And so that way we actually have a tool to kind of direct the spirit of the rules from admin decisions. By the way, if that makes sense.
Here's from that thread from the Mihao guy from ESL, where he basically gives an example of where people were abusing what is not the spirit of the rule. So the point of that rule is just that if there's a real problem in the game, but someone's taking damage, right, we can't just replay every round, so we have to play on. But if you haven't taken damage, yeah, no problem, we'll restart the game mode. He told a story about how teams just started abusing that rule. Because since the letter of the rule just says, until damage has been done, you can ask for a reset. He said teams would do shit like stack 4 people one site, and then if they didn't come to that site before anyone was shot, just say, right, restart the round. By the way, I mean, luckily Legija is not actually German, so maybe you can talk about this. Germans were the worst of all time in 1.6 at this shit. Like, they would literally read the fucking rule book of ESL, and they would do insane shit. Like, famously in online games, if you at the end of the game request the other person's demo because you think they cheated, they have to submit a demo. What the Germans would do is this. They would know that when another team didn't. And just if they lost the game, they'd request the demo. And then if one of you doesn't have that POV demo down, forfeit win. But they wouldn't have requested it if they'd have won the game. Like, these motherfuckers were like rules lawyers, and they would just go into the letter of the law.
It went deeper for us. We even checked configs and stuff. Like
exactly. He was a master of that, of course.
You weren't allowed to jump on mouse.
There you go. You don't use it if you need to, of course. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's actually true, though.
Anyway,
they used to do it.
I think that there is a broader conversation as a result of all of this that will probably mean that we will do something like it's kind of setting out what the spirit of the competition is.
You need like a King Solomon fucker, don't you, to just be like, listen, I know what the rule says, but this is not applied correctly, and you just have to trust that I'm being honest, you know?
Yeah.
And I have one question. Sorry, Monty. Why do you not just fucking acquire? I think it's the same with the UFC, for example. Why do you not just take a retired professional player who has experience? I'm just giving one example. He comes to my mind. He's playing 15 years, 20 years Counter-Strike. He has experience. He knows the rules. He knows how to judge scenarios way better than some random fucking guy who is a silver and has no clue about the game. Actually, just take someone, give him the money, acquire him, let him do several tournaments, let him be the main referee of the team, and he's the guy who's saying. And also idea. This guy also is being respected by all the other people. If you take I don't know, I'm just throwing a stupid name, Exist has retired. Now he's a special referee. He's making the rules. Nobody's going to argue with Exist.
Yep.
Or he will argue, but he will argue.
I think that's a great idea.
The problem is, you're basically like explaining there the fact that esports is too small in the past. The real reason we had these admins before is because it's already cost so much to put on the event. We can't hire like 15 full-time employees to stand behind. So we do get super fans. We get people who work part-time or that's all they do. And so as a result, when we didn't have any money, yeah, we had to have nobodies. Like the most ridiculous ever was DreamHack. Dude, in a DreamHack I went to in 2015, I was having a drink with some of the people who work at DreamHack, and they told me they were working for free, all of them. They thought it was fun to go to a DreamHack and put on a DreamHack shirt and put up scaffolding and run the whole fucking tournament. I was like, what are you talking about? No way, we're getting like 1,000 a day or whatever. Like, what are you talking about? Like, so that's just the past of esports when we were all amateurs. I agree. In the future, the obvious example from nearly all the roles that suck, GM, coach, fucking admin, is it should be like people who are experienced. That could be ex-pro, could just be someone who's been in the industry for years, like the guy I was talking about from ESL. He's been an admin probably for 10 years, so he's probably really good at it. The difference is the admin who's done it for a year and a half, yeah, I can't trust that guy. He probably doesn't know what the fuck he's doing.
Yeah, I do think that having the players, like especially ex-players involved in that way, could be highly valuable because they do have the necessary authority to kind of do things by the spirit of the competition. There's also an argument to be made that, you know, outside of hiring somebody like that, we could also create some sort of emergency group of people where kind of, whether it's one of the players from each of the teams, if something like this were to happen, we just convene them extremely quickly. They know that they're on call during these games in case there's any kind of problem. And then what we do is we don't let the teams that are involved in it vote, and we don't let any teams that would be affected by the outcome. So, for example, if obviously everyone's affected by the outcome, but immediately affected by the outcome, let's say. So let's say a team in Flashpoint, if one team wins, then it might knock another team out of a playoff position. Then obviously we don't let that team vote either. But we have a reasonable council of players who are not immediately affected, kind of voting on what they think the competitive outcome should be. That's another possible solution. But I do agree that having people who understand the game and having people who are not necessarily affected by the outcome could be useful in determining these kind of decisions. And at the end of the day, we can do that all in secrecy, and then I'll just announce it, and I'll be the bad guy and just tank all the aggro. So it doesn't really matter. Like, part of my job as commissioner is going to be to kind of make these announcements and shield other people from criticism. So.
Also, by the way, here's why if people stop being pussies, these players won't have any power. Good luck standing up in the middle of a game in Flashpoint Blast or EPL Tour and saying, oh, I'm just going to forfeit the game. It's like, you idiot, you all signed to that fucking league. Like, you aren't. Your boss is going to be the one tearing your ass up, not the fans. Like, you're going to get a call after that game. There is no power play there anymore. Like, that only worked because that little admin didn't know that, like, actually, this team isn't really going to go back to their hotel and fucking Denmark for a week, I think, just not play. So if he'd have called their bluff, we could have solved this 10 years ago. So I actually don't think that'll be a problem in the future if people just have the balls to stand up.
Yeah. Imagine how much money I would lose with my contract doing that, for example. I'm just fucking stupid idiot doing that. But yeah, as you said, back then people were just scared, I guess.
But yeah, I think your ideas are good, Legija, and I think like they're worth talking about. And this is the advantage that we have with Flashpoint in terms of having contributions from actual partner teams, is that you guys do have a voice in how you would like these things officiated, and we want to listen to your ideas and make sure that you, as the partner teams and as players and coaches, are comfortable with the decisions that we're making. And I also think that probably something we do need to fix in the future, like I said, is having a sort of we have the rule book, but having the start of the rule book say, this is our philosophy of how this event and this tournament will be run. Now, the individual rules are cool, and we'll decide on where they apply. But at the end of the day, spirit is gonna trump letter of the rules. That's just how we're gonna operate. And I think that most people would be happy with how that goes. That way, we just don't end up with super weird letter of the rule breakers that are clearly in some kind of anti-competitive sense. Now, fortunately, this doesn't happen very often, but I do think it's important to get it out there at first.
Also, it would just stop the Twitter bullshit afterwards. Like, everyone can just say, okay, the admin makes the decision, and that's it. I had no power.
Yes.
Nothing's going to happen afterwards.
Well, I also think that we have the advantage of, at least for our partner teams, players criticizing the admins are criticizing something that's owned by the partner teams themselves. So hopefully they have a little less motivation to do that. I think that part of the reason why players do criticize things like Blast is that they don't have an internal mechanism in order to change things or in order to have those discussions. We can just go, we have to listen to the partner teams. You know what I mean? Because we're owned by the partner teams. Blast can do whatever the fuck Blast wants. That's not what we can do, because at the end of the day, we're representing both the teams themselves as well as the production, as well as the administration. They're all one thing. So I would hope that our players and coaches would have better ways internally to register their complaints without going fucking crazy on social media.
You've been lagging the whole time, but we got the gist of it. Like, basically, the difference is the teams themselves. Basically, what you basically said was the teams themselves are part of Flashpoint. Therefore, hopefully, the teams would also like police this. And in theory, the player wouldn't be against Flashpoint, the league, because his team is part of it. It's like it's not against them. And the other thing he basically said was he thinks that they do it because they're frustrated, like thinking they don't have any agency to change it. So the only way they can do it is sway public opinion. I would also say they were just born in Brazil as well. And for some reason, if you're born in Brazil, you just have to complain about everything on Twitter. That's it. It's a rule. I don't know. It seemed it wasn't a fair old thing. You
know? Well, that's a great note to end this show on. Shout out to our, Brazilian partner team, MIBR. That's a, very interesting. There was one question though that I think we should end on, which was, let me go up to it. Will Flashpoint be doing anything with EU teams that couldn't make Pro League, Heroic, Godsent, North, VP? Guess what, guys? Come qualify. Anybody can come qualify. We welcome you.
They came third and won loads of money. Just come on over. You're better than teams. Come dust them all off, get the money.
Yeah, please come take our money. So sure, we welcome you, all of you teams that are not in EPL. Isn't there like OG one of those teams too?
Yes.
Yep. There's another one. Great great team, great organization that can come take Flashpoint's money. So please do that. We encourage you to do it. All right. Thank you, Legija and m1cks, for joining us today. We'll be back next week. More Flashpoint Q&As. Hopefully, sometime in the next few weeks, we'll be able to lock down dates and actually have real information instead of being stuck in permanent purgatory. Maybe Valve will give us the keys to the kingdom of CSGO heaven, and we can enter there sometime in September. So thanks a lot for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Thanks, guys.